Hello everyone! In the previous video, we showed the concept of there is plenty of room at the bottom. Or in other words, the possibility in principle to write down the entire 24 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica on the head of a pen, which was firstly proposed by Richard Feynman in 1959. And in this regard, we ended that video with wondering how we can do it practically. Today, we'll answer this very important question. I'm Mohammed Ali, and this is Science for Free channel. Practically speaking, in order to write on the head of the pen, Richard Feynman proposed some possible approaches that we can use. Although there was no standard optimized technique in that time for writing. Among these different approaches, we can use this setup. This setup starts from using a light source, any light source, to emit light that will pass through a screen, and more particularly a perforated screen which has a perforation of the same shape of the letter that we want to write on the head of the pen. Okay, suppose that we want to write the letter X on the head of the pen. All what we want to do is to use this perforated screen which contains a perforation in the same shape of the X letter, through which the light emitted from that source will pass. And actually, the light will have the same shape of this letter. This light after that will be focused using a convex lens system, which, for example, may be a light microscope running backwards. After that, the light will be focused more and more and impinged on a photoelectric screen. And as you know, the photoelectric screen will emit electrons where the light impinged. This means that the photoelectric screen will emit a letter-shaped electron beam. This electron beam should be focused more and more in order to be reduced in size more and more on the head of the pen. This focusing can be done using a reverse electron microscope. This means that in the ordinary manner, we use the electron microscope to spread electrons over the sample. But if we, as Richard Feynman imagined, if we use the electron microscope in backwards in a reverse manner, we can focus electrons rather than spreading them. We can use this electron beam, which is still have the same shape of the X letter. We can use this electron beam more and more and more in order to be writable on the head of the pen. Once these electrons impinged on the head of the pen, it will cause a detectable change on the surface layer of the head of the pen. This may be done through etching of the surface atoms, maybe, or causing any discoverable, any readable, any detectable change of the surface of the head of the pen. Through ionization, for example, or any other detectable change. In this point, it's noteworthy and it's worth mentioning that the more important than the details of the mechanism of etching, or the mechanism of ionization, or the mechanism of this detectable exchange, the idea of miniaturization, the idea of reducing the size of any letter more and more and more to be writable on the head of the pen. I do believe that Richard Feynman, in his inspiring talk, didn't have the intention to provide us with a detailed description of the procedure of how to write. Uh, I do believe that he just wants to convince us that the idea is acceptable, the idea is applicable, the idea can be done. Details can be customized and can be tailored by the time in a better way. It's noteworthy that there will no problem regarding the intensity, because these few electrons emitted from the photoelectric screen will be focused through the reverse electron microscope system on an extremely small space on the head of the pen. So there will no problem regarding the intensity of the electron. After that, Richard Feynman expanded his idea to encompass all the books produced by the mankind, not only the Encyclopedia Britannica. And in this regard, let's consider the Library of Congress, which contains about 9 million volumes, in addition to the British Museum Library, which contains also about 5 million volumes. This is beside the National Library in France, which contains about 5 million volumes. Take into account that there are some publications, we can consider about 24 million volumes worldwide. And in this regard, we can write the 24 million volumes of interest on about 1 million pinheads. This is because the 24 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica can be written on one pinhead. So the 24 million volumes of interest can be written on 1 million pinhead. It means that we need a square of pinheads. Each side is 1,000 pinheads. This approximately equals to a pamphlet of 35 pages in your hand. A pamphlet of only 35 pages can assimilate all the mankind information, all the knowledge produced by the mankind. Really, it's amazing. The more interesting point in this regard is that we wrote all the mankind information and knowledge just on a 35 pages pamphlet in your hands without codings. So what about if we use codings rather than the original letter? In fact, so far we've written all the information in its original form. It means in letters rather than in codes. But how about if we write them in codes rather than in letters? In this regard, let's consider each letter is represented by 5 dots as shown in this drawings. And each dot actually is a certain number of atoms, a cube of atoms, 5 by 5 by 5 atoms. It means about 125, or we can say as an approximation, each dot is about 100 atom, a cube of about 100 atom of a certain metal type. This is mainly because we want to exploit the internal atoms, not only the surface atoms of the pinhead, but also the internal atoms. So let's consider this argument to estimate the total number of atoms that are required to assimilate all the mankind knowledge. As we mentioned, the estimated total number of books is about 24 million volumes worldwide to rest. And the number of pages per volume is about 1,000 pages. And the number of words per page is about 250 words. And the average number of letters per word in English, for example, in English language, is about 4.7 letters. And the number of dots per letter is 5 dots. As we mentioned earlier, each letter is represented by 5 dots. And the number of atoms per dot is about 100 atoms. This means that the total number of atoms that are required to code all the mankind information, all the mankind knowledge, is about 24 million times 1,000 times 250 times 4.7 times 5 times 100 equal 1.14 times 10 power 14 atoms. Believe it or not, that this number of atoms is present in only a piece of dust. Actually, this means that we can store a huge, extremely huge amount of information in an extremely small volume. And this is the power of miniaturization. In fact, the idea of storing a huge amount of information in a tiny space is not new. This is mainly because in a cell, including plant cells, microbial cells, or even human cells, contain a very small molecule called DNA, which is RNA in some viruses, which is responsible mainly for storing information. DNA molecule, every 50 atoms represent 1 bit of information about the cell. Lastly, Feynman shed the light on some potential consequences of generalizing the idea of miniaturization in various fields, such as computers and computing capabilities, which undoubtedly will make use of applying the idea of miniaturization, wherein it will be possible to involve more elements and enhance its processing and computing capabilities, to the point at which computers can make judgments and choose the best method for computing. Also, it's possible that there is no need for lubrication. This is simply because heat released from friction of mechanical parts of exceedingly small devices will escape very fast. On the other hand, this rapid heat loss will not enable gasoline explosion. Hence, internal combustion will be impossible. So, there will be a need for another chemical reaction that can release energy when cold, which is probably providing such small machines with an electric power externally. Such small machines may be useful for manufacturing small computers or even for performing surgical operations inside our bodies. After swallowing the small mechanical surgeon, which fit with the information externally.